Okay, call the work session to order. First item is the hazard mitigation plan. And Roger, I think you or Patrick and/or Patrick, how you want to do this?
Or Patrick.
Okay,
Well, Roger and Patrick are coming up. Chief Moore had a matter come up yesterday that's keeping him from here, a family matter. So Roger and Patrick are going to pinch hit, but they probably would have been pinch hitting if he had been here anyway, right? So.
you can make him feel good. It took two of them just to fill in for him.
There you go. There you go.
That's right.
Okay, it's all yours.
All right, well, so the hazard mitigation, I just got done talking about the grant side of this, plan, is a plan that's done regionally. And one of the big reasons that it was done regionally was getting somebody to actually do it. One of the biggest things this plan does for us, it finds target hazards, what are big hazards for Orange County. Mainly, Mother Nature is one of the big ones. Flooding, storms, those are big ones. And also the other side to it is, with this plan, it allows us to seek funding through some FEMA grants and such like that. Without this plan, we cannot even ask for reimbursement from FEMA or anything else for any storms.
Well, Roger hit the nail on the head. Two reasons to do this plan regionally. One is because the natural hazards that impact our region, the Rappahannock-Rapidan region, and frankly any region in Virginia or elsewhere in the United States, are generally going to be similar. You know, a tornado doesn't care if it's Orange County, Culpeper County, Spotsylvania County, Madison County. And so what we do, and this is the third update to this hazard mitigation plan. The first one was adopted in 2004, 2005. We did an update 2011, 2012, and then again this one. It's typically a 5-year update. The way the grant cycles run, occasionally we run over that 5-year period as we did this time. As Mr. Wilson mentioned, there's actually a grant cycle open right now for hazard mitigation grant funding through the end of May, and so adopting this plan gets the county eligible to apply for those funds through FEMA. It's 2 funding programs. As I said, the hazard mitigation grant program is post-disaster, so after a presidential disaster declaration, such as the tropical storm and hurricanes from last summer and fall, funding will be made available. It'll flow through from FEMA to the state at VDEM, and VDEM right now is soliciting those proposals from the localities for projects that hopefully are outlined in this plan if the locality chooses to apply for those funds. There's also an annual program, the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program, that's annual funding, a portion from FEMA to the state. Same process. The funding for this plan update comes through that grant program. And in this case, the commission does the staffing, does the updating of the plan. We don't leverage an additional assessment on the localities to do that. Your annual dues pay into that, so as well as the time that your staff puts into it. So we've done that. This was about an 18-month process. We kicked it off March of 2017. Our updates, our staff went through, did mapping, did GIS analysis, data analysis, historical hazards that impacted the region, pulled all that information together. We had 3 or 4 committee meetings during that 18-month period, reported back to the emergency managers in the case of most of the counties. We also have all the towns participate. Well, 6 out of our 8 towns, we've got 2 that have less than 200 people that don't participate individually. Town of Orange, Town of Gordonsville both participated. Because of the differences in staffing and just frankly the services provided by counties and towns, we had town planner from Orange, we had town manager from Gordonsville. We have public works staff that reviews this. Also in the case for Orange, as it was for 4 of our 5 counties, there was a turnover during the update process in the emergency management position, or the coordinator position. So we worked initially with John Harkness, apologize for that, and then also with Nathan Morgan, with Roger once they came on. And as I said, we had 3 of the other counties had the same problem or process where they had either a resignation or a retirement in their emergency management position. What I would highlight, and I believe it's in what you had in your packet, we just have, it's a 4-page executive summary that really gives the high-level overview of what this document is, the reason we do it, why we do it regionally, as I've outlined there. And then again, the hazards that we've identified. These are natural hazards. It's not getting into, with the exception of dams in the region where we've taken some of the larger dams like the Woods, Warrenton Dam, a couple of dams in Culpeper, taken in information they had in terms of inundation analyses, things like that. trying to assess what the impact would be on people and property in the region. For most of the hazards, that's a high-level overview. We're not going in and doing, individual analysis, but it's taking historical data, and then in the case of earthquakes, hurricanes, and tornadoes, there is a FEMA software called HAZUS, which we can model with property values, with building and structural damage, model those 500-year storm type events to give some more valid estimates versus just the historical analysis. So the process lays out, we identify those natural hazards, we rank them as a committee, high, moderate, low risk, and then each locality is able to take those, if it's high, moderate, or low, and go back and say, well, here's one that's ranked moderate, but for our locality, we need to bump this up, this is a higher risk hazard. Orange County hasn't done that, staff didn't feel that the rankings needed any adjustment there, but we do have counties, Madison and Rappahannock, that rank wildfire as a high risk hazard because of their proximity to Shenandoah National Park, whereas wildfire for the region is a moderate risk. So you have the unique hazards for each locality. And then the real, crux of this is the mitigation strategies, which I see Mr. Frame looking at. So each participating jurisdictions identifies mitigation strategies. The way we've set it up is these are strategies that have been carried over from the initial plan through the plan update process in 2011, 2012, and then through this update process. If I look at oranges, I think what you can see is there's a mix of, as the way the plan is developed, you've got a mix of strategies that come from emergency management and get towards sheltering. How can we improve shelters, whether it's a generator? How can we better address that sort of response type event? And then in this case, you also see some that are more planning related, where you've had a planning department staff or other planners in the county review this and sort of say, well, it'd be helpful. I think one that's been pretty common is GIS coordination between planning, zoning, emergency management, E911, things of that nature. And then one of the ones that we added this year, and actually it says 2005, but one of the key things that FEMA has pushed for is incorporating hazard mitigation into your other plans, be that the comprehensive plan or your capital improvements program. Just as a way of seeing this, frankly, as the way I look at it, as this is another funding source. If you've got a capital improvement that may benefit or may have some, whether it's green infrastructure or flood reduction, if there's some benefit there, these are a couple other funding sources that open up. So again, done regionally in cooperation with a lot of different partners. It's been an 18-month process. We've waited 4 or 5 months for FEMA to review and say, yeah, you're good, go get adoptions locally. But I'm certainly happy to answer specific questions if you have them. Do want to thank Roger and Nathan for their participation. Coming on halfway through, I don't think is easy in a process like this, especially when the people you're working with are not emergency managers, we're planners by trade, and so it's sort of like speaking 2 different worlds, trying to get them to interact. So appreciate their assistance.
As I looked at some of the other counties and other jurisdictions' mitigation strategies, there were a few that I didn't see on ours, and I'm just asking why if there was any consideration. There are like about 5 of them. One was on drought considerations, impervious surface limits, stream restoration or vegetation buffers dealing with trying to manage the streams, flood proofing, and the safety of water and sewer systems. Those were some that I saw in other jurisdictions. Was there any reason that they weren't considered, or is anybody, or they weren't in the previous version, so we didn't add them?
If I could take that, I would say that there is, this plan is like other ones where it is based, there's a lot of inertia built in. So if it's in a previous plan, it's probably going to carry over. Hopefully we've seen some positive momentum on some of those projects that were listed in previous plans. In those cases, I think if it's specific, and again, I think that gets to the people that review it locally, the staff. I know that, the previous planning director did give me some feedback on some of these that were more planning related, but in terms of new ideas and things like that, those mostly were run through Roger and Nathan, and I think that the drought and flood proofing probably came up, frankly, from a planning or community development department in another locality and just didn't emanate from Orange at this time. What I would say about the strategies is that this 5-year update is one that we do. That's the mandated process, updating in 5 years. Anything within the strategies, or frankly even minor changes in the plan, can be updated anytime at the locality's discretion. So if there are those projects that you would say, let's talk about this internally and we want to go back and add those, that's an easy process to do.
I was just going to ask, in the future, could we look at making this the natural disasters mitigation plan or something? Because it's very confusing. When I typically think of a hazard mitigation plan, I'm looking at fuel oil storage facilities, railroads, rocket manufacturing companies, that sort of thing, not just the natural disasters. So a lot of people look at this and they then open it up and say, well, this is just natural stuff. And that way, it would make it easier for people to understand that this is for the natural disasters, and each jurisdiction will hopefully either have or work on a man-made hazard mitigation plan.
Yes, sir, I think that's a good point and a fair point. In a lot of cases, I think natural, especially the word natural is often included, and that's something that we can go back and I'll take that today, and I think it wouldn't, FEMA would not care if we added that ourselves, and I would probably help clarify to the public, as you say. Thank you.
But they do pick up some things like toxic spills and terrorism in this,
Right.
which
but
would
it's-
be something other than natural.
Right, but it's primarily for,
Okay.
you know, if that's all I see when I look in there, I'm like, well,
Or radiological problems.
right, that's,
Question, I know FEMA's has, I guess they're finished now redoing the flood zone mapping and the like. And some of the mitigation strategies here appear to be fairly aggressive in terms of identifying properties that, since flood is one of our high-risk areas, you know, in those flood zones, I mean, is there, does this plan encourage us, I'll use that word, encourage, like, better, to actively engage with properties that are in the inundation zones? Yeah, but I couldn't tell, what are we doing? That was the, I mean, I know that's been in there.
Identifying
I look through,
properties out of it.
yeah, I look at prevention, property protection, and structural projects, and those all seem to be things that, where we could, I suppose, take some steps to, you know, work with property owners and say, hey, you're at a high-risk area and you need to be doing A, B, and C, and maybe there's grants to help you. I don't know that we're being quite that active. Should we be?
What I would say is statewide and certainly nationwide, FEMA, that specific language there of, you know, whether it's, you know, acquire or move or, you know, renovate properties or elevate properties, FEMA, that's basically a requirement, have that strategy in for every locality. Whether the locality chooses to prioritize that is left to you all. And in Virginia, what we've seen, the grants are available for those types of projects, for elevation projects, for acquiring. If you've got a building in a floodplain or on a property that you know has had multiple claims against the National Flood Insurance Program or has had to have multiple insurance claims put on it, and the county feels like, you know, this is just not worth it, and this would be something where we should, you know, either try to acquire this property and alleviate and demolish in some cases, you can certainly do that. I think in Virginia, we don't really, I mean, you see those projects in Tidewater. I will say there was one down in Fluvanna County along the James where Fluvanna purchased, I think it was 4 properties that had pretty consistent flooding. But I would say you've got to have a history of seeing that sort of flooding and before the locality would want to take that step.
Well, the language under those descriptions of prevention, property protection, and structural projects was you know, broad enough that it seemed to me it could go in lots of different directions, and I'm just wondering if we need to calibrate that in some fashion, because I don't, at least I'm not aware of any motivation on the part of this board to step in. I mean, I suppose if we became aware of situations that were problems like you were describing, then we could maybe assist or, you know, provide information, whatever. But I don't think, I'm a little bit concerned that we don't seem to be saying that we're going to become very active in this arena and come get you. I don't think that's what we're saying at all.
Yeah, I don't think that's the kind of the not the inference, but I think what FEMA is pushing for is if you have those sort of repetitive loss properties, that maybe the locality would take a leadership role. In our region, there's, I think, 6 repetitive loss properties, none of which are in Orange County. The other thing I would say is to your point about the broad piece of that, education type program, or just reaching out to those homeowners and saying, we've seen you've had multiple, insurance claims, or your property's located in a floodplain. I think that, meets a standard that the locality would say, this is how the step we're taking, but
Right.
whether you want to get into a purchase and ownership.
And that is one of the mitigation strategies, is that information and awareness. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, I just, when I first read through that, I was going, what does this really commit us to do, or?
Commit is the right word, and what I've said to other localities I've been out to is that this, having a strategy in here commits you to nothing. It allows you the opportunity to apply for those grants if there was a strategy that you felt was important enough to the county to move forward.
We've actually, if you look at this thing, we've actually done a lot. I mean,
We, there was 20 or 30 items that we took off, that we had completed probably within the last 2 or 3 years. That's not on that list.
Yeah,
there's some things in our capital improvement program that
Right.
deal with it, and, so, it's not on the forefront of, we do it because of this, but in fact, it's one of the things, we do accomplish a lot that actually covers some of those issues.
well, some of these, I mean, they clearly fit within the high-risk hazard category, because, winter storms and certainly tornadoes, but even severe thunderstorms and flooding, they affect the need for generators and rescue squad stations and emergency shelters, and we know we've had some discussions about those. So those kind of things, I mean, I think they track. Some of the others are not necessarily just in those high-risk categories. But, okay, got it. Any other questions? All right. So are we, let's see, are we prepared to adopt this mitigation plan? Anybody want to?
I would so move.
Okay,
Second.
all right. Any further discussion?
Just, as always, appreciate what Patrick and his staff do to assist us, because it's a lot of good work and a lot of information that our staff would have to track down otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. All right, thank you. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the work session is Historic Clerk's Office renovation and reuse project.
Yes.
Rose,
Hello.
good evening.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Since your packet has been received, we've received an updated floor plan from Wiley Wilson. It just reflects a ADA accessible door for the back exit. So the packet you've received provides an overview of the work that's been done to date, and as it regards to the historic clerk's office renovation. As part of the rural development community facility loan process, a preliminary architectural review was required to be completed, which is also attached to your memo. The rough order of magnitude estimate that was provided by Wiley Wilson came in at $785,000, which includes a 20% contingency and a 3% cost escalation. We'll be happy to discuss the floor plan and any of the building evaluation assessment in just a moment. So based on that figure, we provided you a comparison between the rural development loan and a traditional commercial bank commercial bank's financing terms. As a reminder, the USDA loan has no prepayment penalties. Through informal conversations with a commercial lender, we were advised that in order to avoid a prepayment penalty, and this would be them working with us, we would need to keep a loan for a minimum of 5 years, and that other banks would most likely charge prepayment penalties regardless of the length we had the loan. So the next step in the rural development loan process, which doesn't lock us into anything, is to have an environmental assessment completed. We've reached out to Draper Aiden, and they can do that assessment for $9,200. If you have any questions regarding the assessment or
Do you need the environmental study if you do go with traditional banks? Or is it just with the,
Stephanie.
Yes, sir.
no, you don't, okay.
It might be a good idea just because they mentioned there could be the possibility of asbestos or lead in the building.
Not a guarantee, not a possibility.
Anybody would be shocked if there was not.
Yeah.
I guess in looking at the funding sources or funding possibilities, I ended up asking myself the question, why what do we gain by using the USDA program? I mean, it's higher interest and
Plus, well, it puts off all the funding to our future boards, and we don't have to worry about it, we're just paying lower rate now.
yeah, I guess,
So like the feds.
yeah.
Isn't that what we inherited, though?
Yeah, I admit to being a little bit concerned because years ago when we were trying to build a new building at Dogwood Village, we, for about 6 months, went trundling down trying to meet all of USDA's requirements and everything, and at the end of it, found that it was our most expensive option to use it. So I have that background, of which I will acknowledge. But so it seemed to me that, and the reason I pose that question is that our process seems to be dictated by the terms and conditions of the USDA process. And so I'm just asking the question, is their deal such a good one that we're willing to put up with all of that? Or are we better off to sort of say, what are we really trying to accomplish out of all of this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll speak to that. In fact, I'm trying because there was a paragraph I put in the memo, because Rose and I jointly, prepared this, and I don't see the paragraph in there, but paragraph, and this could have been my saving problem. One of the reasons why I suggested going the route of the rural development program really wasn't because of the interest rate. Certainly the 40-year terms kind of get you in until we, without a whole lot of cash out front, except for some of these initial costs. But rural development loans can also be used, in my experience. They are applicable for fire stations, water and wastewater facilities, animal shelters, T hangars for airports, a lot of public use, local government type capital facilities that industrial parks and such, and I felt it was important for us to have in a project of this scale some staff capacity, frankly. I'm looking at Rose, and she's been willing to carry the weight of this, to understand how the process works. In some past positions, I work very closely with the Planning District Commission, and certainly the Planning District Commission here has ready help, but they were able to turn around these rural development loans because they had done them so many times that the bureaucracy of it all, if I could put it away, wasn't daunting, as it may seem to us right now. And so that if we can develop the staffing capacity to be able to go after rural development loans, and because their amortization is so long, it allows us to get projects going and then program them for payoff in the CIP in a very orderly process. It really was more focused on primarily getting a place where economic development tourism can present the best part of the county, present the county for all the folks that they need to present to the county, but also some staffing capacity and understanding rural development loans. Is it the easier route? No, sir. Probably first and middle. But it does create some opportunities, at least for us not to exclude rural development in the future.
Do the community development loans have a range of how many years? In other words, we got 1 for, and we've got one here for 5, one for 40. I'm always concerned about with something at 40 years, you're gonna be halfway through having to do major upgrades while you're still paying for the original.
Right, my experience, other than wastewater plants and sewage treatment plants, that typically, and I've built a courthouse, animal shelter, T-hanger, and a library, the useful life of those are definitely not 40 years. But we had programmed to pay off the loans within 7 to 10 years. And so, it doesn't incur all the interest that would go along with the 40-year term.
So you could get a 40-year loan and pay it off in 10 years if you want.
That's
One
correct.
year, or 1 year if you.
Okay, but I mean,
No
so,
fees
so
associated.
you're not obligated. I just hate the idea of saddling our successors 20 years downstream.
Well, and so do I, and as a matter of fact, my follow-on comment beyond the RDA situation is, given the amount of money, I mean, it's a big chunk of money, but I'm not so sure that we aren't better suited to, as we're rolling this out, to put in our CIP the funding of this project. Now, it probably can't be done in 1 year. It's gonna have to be a couple of years or so, but I'm not so sure that we shouldn't at least consider the possibility of funding
it
this
upfront
directly.
Instead of borrowing.
And I say that in part because those of us who were involved in the refinancing and new debt that we took on, you know, we were told by the credit agencies and our advisors that we had about the right amount of debt, and reaching out for new debt, even small amounts, is something that they didn't say we couldn't do it. They didn't even strongly recommend against it, but they were saying you're where you want to be, and you need to consider that in your planning. And I guess I would say, and again, I'll say $789,000 or $790,000 is a big chunk of money for us, but it's manageable, I think, in a CIP context, without necessarily having to take on new, especially long-term or very long-term, and as you point out, kind of debt. I'm not, that doesn't really affect the project per se. It's just a decision I think we need to wrestle with. And I'm more inclined to understand the CIP possibilities a little bit before we commit to it.
I agree with you, and I'll try to keep my grumpy hat off a little bit. I know. There's something I don't understand. With this design for the new building, around, with old walls around it, I don't see a historic clerk's office when this project is completed. There's 2 fireplaces in there that are absolutely part of the historic. Doing away with a door in the back, I don't know why we want to do away with a restroom to put a small storage closet. Because quite honestly, those restrooms aren't very big as it is, so I don't know what you're gonna store other than toilet paper. When you start putting skylights in, especially with today's LED illumination, right on the front page of the whole thing, it says Historic Clerk's Office Renovation and Reuse. I don't see a renovation. I see dropping a new building inside of 4 existing walls. And I'll leave
Is
it
that
at that.
historic?
To me, that's not historic. There's a vault door on the very front of it that is historic. It is absolutely historic. Those fireplaces are absolutely historic. I remember when the clerk's office was in there, and it was in full use. It was well utilized. We could just tear it down and build a new one.
Well, it's a listed structure, so there's some issues with doing
Right.
that. I think when we first approached the board about this project a couple of years ago, I think there was general agreement on the board that where tourism and economic development, well, tourism was in the Sedgwick building, and then it transitioned over here, that being on the second floor of the building here was probably not the best
I'm,
location.
I'm not disputing any of that. I think it's a good use for it.
Well,
What I don't understand is
The concept.
the
that-
concept, because the
Wiley
building,
Wilson
the
has
building
presented.
is not, it's not in great shape, but it's usable with the existing office space structure, and it seems just stupid to me to take out perfectly good wooden doors and put in aluminum doors. And as everyone knows, I was not thrilled about the cost for the amount of work on the rescue station. If you go for historic, it's a beautiful building. It has a lot of historic aspects about it. This plan, I don't see anything calling to replace the metal roof. So you'd still have the metal roof and the brick on the outside.
Maybe what you're saying, Jim, is that I think I see this happening as well, that the design that's being proposed was heavily weighted toward meeting the space needs of the functions as opposed to historic preservation.
Right, and there needs to be a
And that's
balance.
not, that balance needs to be recast, much more heavily in terms of the preservation notion.
Well, if we do that, or can we cut the costs a lot? I mean, obviously you need new heating and air conditioning and things like that, those are, but if
And
you're not moving as many walls and,
the exposed ductwork, you know, they make stuff that you can cover that stuff up with.
I think one of the things that we were trying to attempt was to reuse the space inside of this in a more efficient pattern. There was actually quite a bit of discussion about the fireplaces.
Yes.
They're not working,
They're totally inoperable.
they're not
They're
operable.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They take up a lot of room.
Yeah, they were taking up some room.
so does the old courthouse.
Yeah, and understood. But one of the things that we also have, you all recognize, I'm sure, is that that building sitting in its state right now it's not being used, and we're having to maintain it.
Well, I don't think that's, I mean,
It's not being
I
maintained
don't think that
right
speaks
now.
to the point that Jim's making, which is, he's not opposed to putting the building back into use. He doesn't like this particular plan.
Very eloquently put, sir. Thank you.
It's not a matter of whether we should put it back into use, and put it back into use so that, tourism and economic development can function there.
I think it's a great spot
He
for
just,
it.
he doesn't like the suggestion that Wiley Wilson has put out there. So, I mean, I don't think that's an impossible, hill to climb.
No, sir, I don't, and again, this is a draft of, you know, with us putting input to the architect and mirroring it up. Let me suggest this, if, Mr. Crozier, can we work with you and, because that way.
Absolutely.
That way
My-
we can
my-
get the
My
architect and.
concern
Yeah,
is no different, quite honestly, than any of the other projects that we attempt to work on. Unfortunately, Stephanie does a superb job. She adheres to our procurement laws like we're supposed to. Aaron has been working very hard, very diligently to do things in the right manner. But there is quite honestly a point where we as a county have to say, what the hell is reasonable and what is absurd? For the life of me, I don't see how on earth we can get $750,000 worth of value out of a $250,000 project. The rescue station, they completely gutted the second floor and are totally redoing it, and that's $150,000. At this point, I'm thrilled with that. Where does that elevate this to $750,000? Is my, everybody said the plumbing was a really hard thing over at the rescue building. Well, the only thing I see plumbing-wise here is we're doing away with some. So that's not a big lift.
right, and I think given some time and opportunity to sit down, we can walk you through some of the thinking behind the
Well, but
plan.
I think we should clarify
Where?
what we want to see, which is, I think I agree with Jim that this should be a historic preservation project first and foremost. Because if it turns into, we need more space kind of a project, then you probably would pick a different building to go renovate, frankly.
Right.
If that was your, only objective. Here, I think we're trying to accomplish a couple of things, which is do a historical preservation that is fitting of the building and its history, and also use it for what could be some really interesting space for, especially our two outreach operations, which is tourism and economic development. I mean, I think we can get there, but I think this is turning the inside of that building into some modern-looking office, which I don't think is what we should be doing.
No, I think it is the ideal space for economic development and tourism. I truly do. I have for years.
May I say something?
Absolutely.
Looking at the existing fireplace locations, because we love them, we wanted to keep them. But with the intent of possibly having, we see two offices that are pretty much were there prior, when it was a clerk's office. How many were in the clerk's office prior working in this building before? 3?
Probably 3, 4 the
Okay.
most.
I think 4 at one time.
Right,
yeah.
now,
Okay.
and don't try going down that road, Laura, and I'll tell you why.
No, I'm just curious, because I didn't know.
It was the clerk's office. People went in there to do title work. So
Okay.
you could have 10 business people in there working at the same time.
Okay.
So it will handle,
Well, I'm thinking workspaces. So we've got
Right.
2 offices, which are obvious, and then we were needing another space for
we have these
another
now.
office.
We
kind
don't
of
have
area.
file cabinets the way we used to have.
Right.
No, I think we can get there.
I don't know what we're arguing about. I mean, I don't think there's been any, I think all that the board is saying, I mean, obviously, if we're gonna
Sticker shock.
well, I'm not even sure it's sticker shock. I think it's,
Historic.
I think we need to have adequate space for these two departments. And I think we want it to be nice, modern space when we get done. It's not that we're gonna, the board's gonna go over there and do painting in the evenings so we can save some money. But there needs to be more of an eye toward preserving the building in its historic state. And maybe we don't wring out every square foot of usable space, so like the fireplaces stay and yeah, we lose a little bit there.
Yeah, they're ornaments, they're not gonna be, you're
No,
not gonna
yeah,
build
there's-
fires,
Yeah, we
but
can't really use them.
No, but
But-
they do,
They
they
look
do
beautiful,
add
though.
a character to the,
Yeah.
I'm certain that Wiley Wilson or someone can reimagine this to bridge the gap here and make it all come together. I just don't see that this is, you hear about arguing between the 45-yard lines. This is more like between the 48-yard lines. I mean, this is actually,
And picking up that, I think, one of the things after we left from September 11th was go forward and come up with at least a rough order of what the cost is, what the rough order of the design layout, which we've done. Obviously, that needs to look at a historic preservation perspective, rather than essentially an office layout, and see how we might be able to measure the two together. And then at that point, and I think I heard Mr. Crozier volunteer to help us along that.
I did hear that.
I did hear that.
That's not a problem,
did
because the
hear that.
amazing thing is, there is more usable space as it currently exists than it does with the renovation. That's the amazing thing. The bathroom is larger, that storage space and the way the doors swing, there is actually more usable space as it currently sits.
So I think there's plenty of opportunity here to go through and revisit this first design. The only other thing that I'll add is programming this through the CIP. I think when I originally proposed the rural development loan program, that programming it through the CIP was what I was proposing, in that not running this through a 40-year term, but getting the project up and going and completed so that we then could go through the process of programming it in the CIP to pay off the loan. One of the challenges that we are, and you know, Phil and Rose and Lori are making do down at the visitor center. Their offices, I don't know if you call them when the train goes by, they kind of have to stop a little bit. So if we wait to program this next year's CIP, next 5 years already been done, so this project is not in there, we would have to maybe wait another cycle to do
We
this.
we haven't approved the CIP for,
I understand.
And we can amend it at any time.
Yes, sir, we can do all of those things.
And the
if
building
that-
still needs to be emptied. It's full of,
Well, that.
Very valuable document.
Well,
Yes,
we've already given notice to those that have those documents, and we're gonna make arrangements.
right.
well, we need to do, I think the board needs to do some work in terms of finding the money. You know, I don't know that it should, whatever that decision ends up being, shouldn't affect the moving forward with finding the design and figuring out the preservation approach and those kind of things. I think that should go forward.
So if I could recap the bidding here, we're gonna work with Mr. Crozer, certainly.
I thought Jim just did that.
Well, I need to
I was
hear.
just talking to myself.
No, sir, I just need to repeat it so I understand what our charge is. We work.
Two things,
We work the design with Mr.
work with
Crozer.
Jim and we'll work out the money.
How about that? Got it.
And they say, the money's the easy portion, work with
Although
me, so-
neither one of
Do
them
we-
seem very,
Yeah.
they're not
Do
really
you have a
well.
motion to
They're not
approve
simple.
The environmental assessment, no, we'll hold off on that until, because that environmental assessment may be more geared to what rural development requires versus asbestos and lead.
Yeah, I'm,
Yeah, and that's a guarantee that both
Yeah.
of those are in there.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to do it. It's not gonna be a choice.
right, yeah.
Not like we're thinking about buying the building.
But I don't think we want to do it to their specs. Let's do it to,
We'll do it to what we need to do.
That's
There's
right.
places we don't have to open, and if we can paint over the asbestos, that's great. There's other places we have to dig it up.
Well, I don't know if we
We've got
wanna be
problems.
painting over it, but,
So-
yeah, well,
Yeah.
So, just so I understand, we're gonna work to bring back a design that certainly has been vetted, enough to bring it back. And then, as we move through the budgeting process, there's certainly a recognition on the board's part that we need to be able to put some dollars to this, to look at starting a process, probably the next fiscal year, kind of a July 1 going forward, fall type of thing to get going.
yeah, I mean, some of the money could be ready long before the project is ready.
That's,
Because July is not that far away.
yes, sir. So, as long as we're on the right track,
Thank you.
okay.
All right, thank you all. Sorry to be, this is a work session. See, this is what we do at work sessions. It's a good thing,
A lot more back and forth.
right? Okay,
That's it.
that's it. All right, we will adjourn the work session.
Unless we want to recap this no.
No, I don't,
Thank you, everybody.
yep,
thank you all.
Yeah, I do appreciate Rose and everybody else that's collaborated on this.
I'll call the Lincoln's birthday celebration meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I have so far one change to the agenda. Item 4B be removed. Minutes for January 22nd meeting. Any other changes or additions?
I'd like to add, under new business, item A, private roads.
Okay. All right.
I would
Anything
amend
else?
with- or- No, I would, motion with the two amendments to adopt the agenda.
Okay. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Special presentations and appearances, service awards. Mr. David.
Yes, sir, we have five in total employees receiving service awards. Three of them are here, and as soon as you get situated over here on the side, I'll call up our first recipient. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm pleased to share that our Commonwealth's Attorney, Diana O'Connell, is receiving a 15-year service award. So, yes, you can come up.
Come on down. Congratulations. And you need to stand right here and make me look pretty. Thank you and congratulations.
Next, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's my pleasure to present Captain Jason Smith with the Orange County Sheriff's Office receiving a 15-year service award.
Another 15. I don't know who's gonna make us look pretty.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the last employee here to receive their award today is Sergeant Brian Seal, 10 years. And, Mr. Chairman, two employees who couldn't be with us today, Tammy Corbin, a Senior Administrative Assistant, 15 years, and Donna Lucas, Senior Administrative Assistant, 15 years.
Okay.
And we'll make sure that they get there.
I have one more employee that is here, named Brian Davis.
How many years?
46, no.
Is this dog years?
Oh, wow. You're right. Talk about time flying. This says 5 years. Did somebody check the dates in the manual? Yeah, I heard that. Anyway, 5 years.
This wasn't on my list.
I have a different list sometimes. Okay. Business Spotlight. Rachel Helsley, owner of Heritage Company. Welcome.
So I guess I just tell you guys a little bit about
Yes,
myself.
please do, right.
Awesome. I moved to Orange County about almost 6 years ago. I have had my air license for almost 12 years. And I moved here to be closer to family, and I started working at Med Spa, Virginia as a hairstylist there. Helped them kind of build their hair salon business, and decided to recently branch out on my own and opened my own salon here in Orange. I have room to grow. It's currently just me, but I do have room for 2 other stylists and hopefully a receptionist in the future.
And where are you located?
I am located in the same complex as Payne's Pools between
Okay.
Speedway and My Avocado.
Right.
So I'm right there. Easy location to find, easy to get in and out of. Great for walk-ins when my schedule allows it. I am also a single mom, so if I'm not at the hair salon, you can find me at the ball field. And if I'm not there, I'm also a full-time student. So I am in my last semester of my business associates through Germana.
Great.
So-
Great. Congratulations.
Julie.
Right.
So, you guys have any questions for me?
Can you do anything for Mr. Whiter-Eyed?
Yeah, the three, Jason and you and I would,
That's exactly
if we give you a picture, would you study it and see what?
Okay, we could work it out. It might not be yours, but. All right, well, thank you
Well,
all.
welcome.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Good luck on your business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. That was more fun than your topics, I think, Alan. Mr. Saunders, the VDOT quarterly update.
Chairman White, members of the board, good evening. My name is Alan Saunders, here with your Virginia Department of Transportation quarterly update. Here with me tonight is our residency operations engineer, Jonathan Rumbaugh, and we'll quickly review some of the highlights from your latest monthly report and address any questions that you may have. At Smart Scale, that really is exciting news that in the recommended scenario for the CTB, one of our Orange County projects was selected for that scenario, the Route 20 and 33 intersection improvements up at Spotswood Trail and Constitution Highway. So that CTB will continue to evaluate the recommended scenario this spring, and in June, vote on the final scenario to advance the projects. And we'll begin to, in round 3, we prepared earlier than we did in round two, and in round four, we'll try to begin preparing earlier than we did in round three and start within probably 12 to 13 months, we'll begin preparing for the next round. Jumping down to your projects, Route 603 Indiantown Road, we've got the stone ready to go on that, and as soon as it will dry out, we're gonna get out there and finish the subgrade and hard surface it. The Route 3 and intersection improvements down in the eastern end of the county, that too, we're waiting for it to dry out. We have to do the grading on the west side of the intersection to widen that, do some drainage improvements. The signal work is complete, and then we'll turn the signals on and open that one up. But we're waiting for that to dry out before we can begin. The rural addition out West Wind Drive, out in the western end of the county, we did take that into the system and has a route number. We'll continue to maintain it until it dries out enough for us to begin working on the improvements for that route this spring. The Route 617, 627, 701, the Battlefield Farms paving project, Jonathan's preparing a contract, bid documents to advertise for bid. We're gonna put that one out to keep that one moving forward. The Route 2231 roundabout, also have some good news with that. That project is ahead of schedule, so we're gonna try to go to advertisement this fall instead of into 2020. Route 635 Greenwood Road Bridge, still on schedule to advertise that for bids in summer of 2020. And then the Route 601 low-speed curve, we've identified a project manager for that. He was assigned a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to begin meeting with the property owners to review the development and delivery process for the project and the scope, and to get their impacts, or get their feedback before we begin the design phase for that. Resurfacing table, in your next monthly report, you'll see the resurfacing schedule for 2019 with all the routes affected to that. The secondary six-year plan updates, we're meeting with the district staff to review the funding scenarios, the project schedules and estimates. And we'll provide updated booklets, just as we have in the previous years, with routes, ADTs, and recommendations to Ms. Simpson for distribution. And we hope to get that done within the next 6 to 8 weeks. In your traffic engineering studies, the two that I noted here, Route 651 Terry's Run and Route 731 Tisdale Road, those were both completed with reductions recommended, and those have been signed. So I didn't note any other, and if we missed any, please let me know, Ms. Simpson, I'll follow up on that. County safety and operational improvements, the one key initiative that we are advancing now is the town of Gordonsville, north of the town of Gordonsville on Route 15, what we call the road diet. Center turn lane there at Inwood Drive all the way to the merge point. And again, we've got a contract ready. We've got a contractor ready to go for that project. We're just waiting for it to dry out and conditions improve. And then as soon as it's warm enough, we'll get out there. That's a major remarking on Route 15. And land use. Thankfully, we're excited to announce the addition of our new area land use engineer, John Wilson, who is working with Mark Wood, who John started exactly 11 months after Anthony Herlock was promoted. So it's taken us a while to recruit that position, but John's a great addition to the team. We're excited to have him and somebody dedicated back to Orange County land use needs, because we've got several things that we need to catch up on. And to that, for acceptance, secondary street acceptance, we're reviewing A&K Boulevard, Twin Drive, Germanna Drive, and Fieldstone Lane now currently is on their list to review and spec for secondary street acceptance requirements. Our crews continue to respond to inclement weather. Several of them are working this evening. Our work orders are drainage issues and pothole repairs, and you'll continue to see those. So if we have any big holes open up the roadway, please call the residency and report those. We'll get on them as soon as we can.
So, Alan, you said that the 20 and 33 intersection made it through the first round of smart scale?
The 20 and 33 project is in the recommended scenario that was presented to the Commonwealth Transportation Board last month. So the comment there were 440 close projects included in the recommended scenario statewide. The CTB will review those through the spring. We have public hearings scheduled in April and May throughout the state for them to get feedback about the recommended scenario, and then they will vote in June to adopt a final scenario. So the 2033 project is in the recommended scenario. Of the $700+ million that of projects, we probably had close to $9 billion in applications for $700-some million of funding. And of that, the Culpeper District had about 20 for district grant programs, and of those 20 millions, some has been at least recommended for funding for the 20 and 33 project.
And would that be would that be both intersections or?
No, it's
or
the eastern intersection.
First one and, okay.
It is. It's
Because you
the
had given
eastern-
me a drawing with both of them on it, so.
Right, it's the eastern
So those
intersection.
are two separate projects,
Correct.
okay.
That is, it's the eastern section that includes 738, crossover, the improvements at 738, that entire intersection. And I have a diagram of that I can send to you.
So it's actually the intersection that comes out by the T's, in front of D's Market.
Yes, sir.
It's that intersection.
It's that intersection, and then improvements to the east, the legs of the roundabout itself.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Alan, the Matthews Mill Bridge, we met down there several months ago to look at that situation. Is that, or have you and the neighbors decided on an approach there yet?
We have.
Okay.
Yeah, we have decided on an approach. Jonathan has been working behind the scenes with our environmental group because we have to get approval to do
Right.
any work in the stream.
Right.
So we have approval from them to advance. We're gonna schedule a meeting with the property owner on the eastern side of 630.
Right.
And just show them the area where we wanna do the improvements, and we're gonna build up the bank adjacent to the structure,
Okay.
all the way level to the roadway.
Yeah. I received a series of emails over the last couple of weeks, asking about the follow-up and things, so okay, all right.
If we are
Good.
gonna do that. We have scheduled a meeting with the property owner, we're gonna show them the affected area, where we're gonna clear the trees, and we're teetering back and forth between hiring a contractor or doing the work with our own state forces, and we've determined that we're gonna do that ourselves. It's some large stone that we're gonna line the bank with, that required environmental approval, and thankfully now we've got.
To save the
everything-
bank and required environmental,
Got everything lined up and ready to go, we just need to meet with the property owner and show them where we're going to work, and then we'll get started.
okay. And they seem to be amenable to, they were one of the ones that were most concerned about it, as a matter of fact, so, okay, good, all right.
That's something that we hope to do, if the weather permitting, within the next 4 weeks. We're gonna meet with them as soon as we can, next 10 days. And then if we can get out there and find a stable place to sit, we'll get out there and get the work done quickly.
Yeah, there's not a lot of room to,
It's all wet.
So, the section of A and K and then Twins, looking at roughly what, probably 2 months to be ready for the sheriff's office to enforce?
Eight
Two.
weeks is reasonable. 8 weeks is reasonable. We're going to do the final punch list inspection this week. And if there's anything that needs to be improved, we'll route that back through the county to give to the developer. I spoke with the developer this week and let him know the schedule and the process that we're gonna follow to review. And we don't see anything that really jumps out at us out there. It's just been sitting there for a while, so it may just need to get cleaned up.
Okay.
We'll provide those comments back, route them through, and then the work, the downtown work that we have to do, the central office, that can take 6 weeks alone, but we'll go ahead and accept it and wait for the paperwork to process, to get the route number and all that stuff, the signs
Okay.
up. But
And once it is posted, once the signs are up, everything's through the system, correct? Okay, so,
Twin Drive and A and K.
right, okay. Just throwing out some food for the gentleman in the back of the room.
Mr. Treasurer, a resolution will be prepared for you all to adopt, and then we can make sure that Captain Smith is notified of that.
Okay, excellent. Because I'm relatively sure that the residents down in Wilderness Shores are much happier than they were now that they have all the correct signage and everything for a state road through there. It's enforceable, and so, thank you very much for all the work.
Sure, yes, sir.
I'd like to thank you for your response to the lady who wants that pedestrian crossover at the Lake of the Woods entrance. I don't know if will deal with it, but you've done a good job with that.
Well, thank you. And that intersection's got a lot of traffic, and anything that we
Yeah,
can
I
do
mean,
there
even
to
if we
improve.
were to do all the other stuff, the amount of time it takes for a pedestrian crossover, and I don't think there's enough room in the median for it. That's, yeah.
It would take some work. Initially, when I reviewed that with Nathan Umbarger, he began to walk me through the things that we would need to consider. And it'll take, just to make sure that the pedestrians are safe and we provide safe places for them to land and to cross and to stage, it's gonna take some work in that intersection.
But any time that you use for pedestrian crossover, already that intersection is bollocksed up.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine. Plus, I don't think the association or the shopping center wants to put a sidewalk up there.
Get a shuttle.
Absolutely.
Something that's
That'd be the
safe,
safest
come
thing
out
to
on the
do.
weekends, and Jonathan and I will shuttle them back and forth.
Sounds like a plan.
That problem has been going on for at least 15 years.
Okay, anything else for Alan?
You got it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Okay, consent agenda,
Motion to approve.
okay, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. New business, private roads.
Yeah, back when we did the last revision of the subdivision ordinance, we, my assistant's passing out some literature here. It's his first day on the job, so he's
Large types of.
I've been 5 years on the job.
We changed the way private roads were handled, and the planning commission has a role in improving private roads. And Mr. Capello of the planning commission is some concerns about that, because he feels like that the planning, or the zoning, the subdivision ordinance is sort of you check the boxes, you fill in the blanks. If you qualify, you're good to go, and if you don't qualify, you're not good to go. So he is concerned about the planning commission having the expertise or ability to make these sort of technical decisions, and doesn't understand. It was his understanding that the planning commission has some leeway to turn down some of these for perhaps what you would call policy reasons or special reasons, and he doesn't understand how that's possible. So I'd just like to have a little conversation about this, and perhaps we need to go back and revisit how that's written and either change it or alter it so it's a little clearer what we're asking the planning commission to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the private roads, there are really three key parts within the subdivision ordinance that we need to look at it as a package, if you want to think about it. One is the design standards that are there, that vary depending on the amount of traffic or number of lots served. Then there's a bonding requirement that is part of that requires an inspection of the roads once they're finished. And then thirdly, the other important piece is a road maintenance agreement that's required. And it could be, and I think we need to examine this, that those three provisions taken together give us the tools that we need to sort of manage the private road situation. I mean, I'm sure all of us get lots of calls about issues with private roads. And most of the time, it's because there is no maintenance agreement in place. Not always, but most of the time. And part of the reason for doing this, I think, was to provide some visibility to property owners that reside along or potentially could buy into a property that is on a private road, that says you need to understand the responsibilities that you're taking when you do this. But I'm not so sure that we can't deal with that in a way other than having the planning commission involved. Because I actually agree that with the other provisions, I'm not sure that there's a role that I could point to for the planning commission in making that determination. You know, Mr. Crozier and the county attorney were all involved in some of those discussions, and maybe you can refresh my memory. But as I went back and looked at it, again, the bonding piece, the design standards piece, and then the road maintenance agreement piece seemed to close the loop on that matter from a specification standpoint.
One concern Jason had additionally was he feels like, because if essentially somebody comes in with a well, a plan, said, this is what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna obey all the rules, then essentially the planning commission should approve it, because if they're obeying the rules, if they're checking off the boxes, everything should be fine. But by having it go through the planning commission, it adds quite a bit of time to the process, because planning commission meetings are held maybe twice a month, maybe once a month, maybe every 2 months. Whereas if this were something that were signed off on by somebody in the planning office, presumably could be done quicker.
Can I give a little explanation, address Mr. Capel's concerns, explain why this is the way it is? There's no right in Virginia code or in Virginia law to have a private road. Your subdivision ordinance contains road standards. That's where road standards go, is in your subdivision ordinance. So we put road standards in our subdivision ordinance. Our previous subdivision ordinance gave our planning director carte blanche to waive any requirement in the subdivision ordinance as he or she deemed appropriate. We took that out. We had a discussion whether we wanted to eliminate private roads altogether, and the board said, well, we don't want to eliminate them altogether. So you have to understand conceptually what's going on here. We're saying you build state roads. However, we will give our planning commission the ability to grant you a waiver that you used to be able to get from our planning director to allow for a private road. It is strictly discretionary. Mr. Capel is incorrect that there's some duty, and in fact, the ordinance says exactly the opposite. It says, the ordinance says, in making its decision on private road, the commission shall consider impacts of the proposed road, its resulting development, future land use. In other words, the commission is, and it says it shall be in its sole discretion. The commission was tasked with analyzing whether a waiver, which is in effect what this is, a waiver is appropriate for a particular road development. That's how this is structured. This is how it legally works. In that what the planning commission is being asked to do is, hey, give us, to analyze an application for a private road and to determine whether a private road is appropriate in that location, considering all of the circumstances around it, gives the neighbors a chance to opine. And it is completely discretionary, because it is in essence a waiver of the requirement that you have a state road.
Sure, well, that sounds to me like we should restate the role of the planning commission, or at least clarify it. Because the language here now even says, things like that it's, you can't, the decision is unappealable, final and unappealable, for example. And the other thing is, it seems to me that it's important where the planning commission role lies. Is it before a site plan and all of the engineering has been done? Is it conceptually, we would like to do a private road that meets all the standards? What do you think? Is it that, at that point, or is it basically a plat approval? I think we need to clarify that.
And I can, now in this kind of hybrid role where I'm subdivision agent and zoning administrator, so I'm intimately involved. We actually have our first application that is due to come before the planning commission next week. I'd given an email to the planning commission about a week or two ago identifying the subdivision. I think it's out in the western part of the county. The developer, I've met with the developer, and the application is before a plat is submitted. This is pre-plat process, and so there's an application that's on our website that's completed. They have gotten a surveyor to show how this road, it's an extension off Willie Miser Lane and going back, and how 7 lots I think are going to be served by it. And so she reached out to Mr. Capel, independent of anything that we did, and that's how he got aware of the pending application. And I understand why she did that. He's the planning commissioner for the district and so forth. So the process is about to be engaged for the planning commission next week. We have not had any plats submitted or anything like that. We have provided a resident engineer a copy of this, even though it doesn't necessarily impact the public road. We want at least their eyes on it to see if there were any impacts, that additional lots coming out, site distances and things like that. And he's communicated back to Sandra Thornton about that. So just to restate, this is a front-end application before the plats are submitted for review and approval.
So the planning commission has taken the position that their role is very early in the process.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, and so the presumption is that it has to be a state road or a state, but this gives basically it's a waiver to have a private road instead of a state road. Is that the?
What, we're allowing private roads, or theoretically, we're saying the possibility for a private road. We went from private roads by right, which created these big private road problems we have now, to discussion of eliminating private roads altogether. The board decided we didn't want to do that. So what we tried to do is find a middle ground that went from private roads by right to something less than elimination of private roads.
Okay.
So
So if somebody wants to build it, he'll build a state road and make it to state standards, there's no need for any kind of waiver. But if he says, I don't wanna do that, I'm only gonna have 7 homes down there, and I wanna build to this standard, then it comes to the planning commission, not to necessarily look at the standard, but to look at the other elements such as, what utilities, what plans, what use is gonna be made.
Exactly, what state law allows? State law in state subdivision and development law says we can make a provision for waivers. It says the default decider of waivers is the planning commission, or it can be your planning director. We used to give the planning director that decision authority. What the board decided is on these private roads, we'll give the planning commission that discretionary authority. It's unappealable in the same way that it would have been unappealable if the planning director didn't give you a waiver. You can't, every time the planning director doesn't give you a waiver on something, go to court or go to well, you can't go to BZA, but go to court, because in essence, makes every decision he makes a court issue. And so there's no appeal if a planning director doesn't give you a waiver. And so we use the same language, because whether it's the planning commission giving you this right or the planning director giving you this right, it is discretionary.
Okay, what about the fact that this is in the subdivision ordinance as opposed to, say, the zoning ordinance?
Well, it couldn't be in the zoning ordinance, because it's related to development. Your road standards are in your subdivision ordinance in state law. Your road standards go in your subdivision ordinance.
So it's not true then that the subdivision ordinance has to be 100%, these are the standards, as long as you go by that, you're okay?
That is the blanket correct assessment of a subdivision development ordinance. With this caveat, we are allowed by state law to have a provision for granting waivers. Waivers are by their definition discretionary. So yes, if our standards say if you do X, Y, and Z, we have to approve you, that's correct. However, we have created this discretionary addition. We're not required by state law, but we are allowed to have a provision where we can give discretion, where we allow things under certain circumstances.
And you feel certain that the place for that discretion is in the subdivision ordinance?
Well, any waiver of any subdivision provision would be in the subdivision ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we talking about waiving the construction standards or
We don't use the language waiver here, but it's the practical effect is the same. We could simply say, we could add a sentence if it made everybody feel better. The legal end result will be the same. We do not permit private roads in Orange County. Paragraph B, the planning commission may grant a private road waiver based on the following. I mean, it's implicit in this language. It
okay,
isn't
but the following would
express.
include meeting these construction standards.
Right.
Right.
There is no waiver to the construction standards. It's
There'd
only
be no waiver to the construction
Right.
standards.
Couple other points that somebody, Mr. Freeman said that a developer could develop only 3 lots and make it a public road, because the minimum land use requirement are 3 residential dwelling units, and then they'd accept that into the state road system. Our ordinance operates on up to 10 lots, up to 9 lots on a private road. The 10th lot and anything else off of that has to be a public road.
It's 11th.
Or 11th, I'm sorry, I mixed that up. So.
And
one of-
2, we make a driveway.
Make a driveway, a joint driveway.
So, I mean, if it makes the planning commission feel better, we can add the implicit language to explain what's happening explicitly here. But I don't know if that's where we're going, or that's where we wanna go, or do we wanna go back to private roads by right?
Well, if the idea is, if this is based on the state saying you can grant waivers, then why wouldn't we just go ahead and call a spade and say this is granting waivers?
Well, we can do that, if you think that'll clarify for everybody, we can certainly fix the language to say it that way.
I mean, if that's what we're doing, then it seems to me that's what we should say we're doing.
Okay.
Well, if we're granting a waiver, there are reasons you may not want to grant that waiver.
Well, and I actually, I like the sound of that, because I think one of the issues is that we need to better define for the planning commission what action they should take. Granting a waiver is an action that
Yes.
can be described and can be documented. And I think that would be a step in the right direction.
And by having the planning commission do it,
There's an
Should
opportunity
be-
for public input.
that, and there's a better chance that we will have a standard, instead of every time that we change whoever that individual was in the planning department, from day one, this one says, oh, yeah, you can do whatever you want. Or, nope, I've had issues with you in the office before, we're not going to do it. This takes a lot of that out and takes 5 individuals to sit down and look at it, hopefully, very rationally.
Okay. But it gives some considerations as what they would consider in granting the waiver. He's gotta build to this standards, but if it's going to have an environmental impact, or there's a traffic issue, or any of those other things, they could say, we're not going to grant the waiver.
But it's already there.
I know.
It already
There are
says,
findings.
shall consider impacts on the proposed
That's what,
road, its
yeah,
resulting
that's
development.
separate from the standard. That's just, okay.
Those are the standards that they need to make findings on in order to grant.
Right, so, yeah, subsection B there is the review standards, subsection C is the minimum development standards if they
So-
do grant the review.
They would give a waiver to the restriction against the private roads, but then the private roads would have to be built to the standards that are contained.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Exactly. Yeah, all I'm gonna do is, if the board all nods their head yes, I will add some explanatory language as to what's actually happening here to make it clear.
Would that
This
need to
is a
go through-
discretionary granting of a waiver, that our policy is public roads, and this is granting a discretionary waiver to allow a private road when in fact our policy is public roads.
Would you wanna change it and add a new paragraph preceding or part of private roads, subsection 1, that says, basically, we don't allow private roads except.
Yeah, that's what I'll work on, and what I'll do is I'll have it for the planning commission so
Thank
that
you.
they've got it on their plate next week.
And
Okay.
Mr. Lansing will be briefed
Eric
up.
will be there, but I will make sure he's totally up to
And
speed.
then the other thing, Mr. Frame, I just want to make clear, this is not a public hearing. There's no letters sent to adjoining property owners, there's no advance notice, there's certainly time and expense with that kind of process. The subdivision ordinance doesn't require that, because it's not a fundamental land use change.
But doing this text amendment would require action by this board and a public hearing, I take it, is that?
Correct,
And
because it'd be an ordinance amendment.
there are other text amendments that are beginning to present themselves in, some are in the zoning, and I think there's at least one more in the subdivision. My question to county attorney is, can we identify a set of those? I don't know how many it is, half a dozen, let me just say, as a placeholder, and take action on those as a group?
Sure.
Since we've identified one potentially here, I think that there,
Probably.
Mr. Crozier and I are aware of a couple of others that we'd like to bring to the board and to you.
Yeah, if you just bring them to our
Yeah,
attention,
why-
we'll
why don't we-
incorporate them into the code
into,
amendment.
to this advertisement. I just want to plea for Sandra and myself until we get the senior planner on board, the ability to staff this through the planning commission. I mean, we'll make it happen, but be mindful of.
Send it to me, I'll
Could-
make sure we work on it.
Could you do a memo to the chairman of the planning commission with a paragraph that says your action is really in effect the granting of a waiver?
What I'll do is I'll do a memo that explains the code amendment they're seeing on their desk.
So that will define their role for them. I think that's really the question. Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay, all right.
I will take
Okay,
care of it.
okay, Mr. Johnson, that take us where we need to go for the moment?
I think so, yes.
Okay, all right. Old business, I see none. Department Director, Constitutional Officer report. Tourism, you're up again. Welcome back.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I wanted to come in front of you today. I'm gonna kind of just recap the memo that hopefully you've already gone over, in your packet. But I wanted to talk about some department budget amendments that I was hoping that you'd be able to grant. With the vacancy that was through the year of 2016, no, 17.
17,
Yeah, 17, I'm getting my years messed up. There was some lagging on some projects that weren't able to be taken care of due to lack of staffing. And so when I got on board in 2018, getting up to speed in my position and my job, some of those projects still weren't able to be dealt with within the timeline of our fiscal year budgeting. And so with that, we looked at having some carry forwards taken care of and bringing some money forward from that FY 17-18 budget. And we had at the beginning of this, had asked for $55,000 to be brought forward unexpended from the salary marketing and several other line items from that budget and moving them forward into 2018-19 budget. With that being looked at by you all, you consider reappropriation of those unexpended funds, and on the request on the 11th of September, you all decided that some of those funds be reappropriated and move forward through the 18-19 fiscal year. Supplement, those would be they would be supplementing certain ongoing and upcoming projects that I would be able to then deal with, because I was not able to deal with those right there at the beginning of my taking over the position. I was still trying to assessing what was going on. So, fast forward to present, we were able to bring forward $17,100 for specific projects. Those projects were our Travel Writers marketing trip, along with a $10,000 bring forward for our flooring that's going to be happening very soon at the train station, our visitor center, and also for some marketing initiatives. There was a balance that we had requested originally that was deferred for reappropriation at that point in time. And now that I'm further along in my position and working on some of these projects that had been kind of left undone and untaken care of, I'm at the point now where I want to go ahead and try to move forward with those projects. And some of those projects are going to take some chunks of my budget that I'd like to have used from that reappropriation. Going down the little projects, I've got the tourism website that has been brought to my attention that we are we could have some security issues because the format that I'm using right now is out of date. So that now that it's been brought to my attention, kind of needs to be dealt with sooner than later, because we don't want to expose ourselves to any kind of security issues with our tourism website. And also, we'd like to become a little more mobile friendly than we currently are. So that could be up to $8,000. I've done a little bit of research, gotten some quotes. We have a pretty large website because we carry a lot of pages, because we carry a lot of information, and I've gotten quotes ranging from $4,000 to $11,000 for a redesign and kind of a reboot on the website with a secured process and something that could be updated more regularly.
If I could, I just want
Yeah.
to jump in, because I also want to be mindful of time and things like that. These were all projects that were in either not started or hadn't been started
Right.
last fiscal year. This is just bringing the these things forward for completion by June 30th.
Right.
Just mindful of the board's time before 6. Are there any questions that you all
Yeah, I
have?
just wanted to see if there was anything that stuck out or you had questions on. All projects that are fairly important, and I'm at the point now where they're a priority on my plate, and I'd like to be able to move forward with them. And having these reappropriations will help with our budgeting to make sure they can happen and not necessarily be pushed for another fiscal year.
Lori, the only one I saw that I wasn't sure what the actual event was, the Virginia for Lovers anniversary thing. What is that?
That is actually an event that we are gonna be, told on Thursday if we've been granted. It's a regional event that Greene County, Orange, and Madison has partnered together. 50 Years of Love, it's the 50-year anniversary of Virginia's for Lovers brand. And with that, Virginia Tourism Corporation offered up a grant opportunity to be able to develop an event. It's a 50-day event, that we have put together a grant to be able to be a part of that celebration this year. And that would really help supplement our marketing budgets and the things that we need with the regional partners that I'm developing. So we find out Thursday if that actually moves forward and we're able to move forward with that 50-day event.
So this is a sharing
Yes,
of the.
yes, we're
okay.
very excited about the partnership.
Okay. Any other questions of Lori?
Motion to approve?
Okay, is there a second? Anybody,
Second.
everybody? Okay. Any more discussion? Any questions for Lori? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you
Unanimous.
all.
Go forward. Do good
Very,
things.
very much, thank you.
Okay, county attorney's report.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, a while back, the State Board of Elections concluded that several homes that were believed to be in Greene County were in Orange County, disrupting voting patterns for those folks and creating all kinds of unintended chaos. This board and the Greene County Board have both determined it would make sense to do a boundary line adjustment that puts those properties officially and legally in Greene County that everybody has believed were in Greene County for the last 20-plus years. So all I'm asking for tonight, the way this works on a boundary adjustment is we have to have a public hearing first, and then once the public hearing is held, we would petition the court, and the court would enter an order correcting the boundary or adjusting the boundary. And what that will do is it will officially put those properties in Greene County that everybody believed were in Greene County anyway. And so all I need tonight is authorization to go ahead and get that scheduled for a public hearing.
Okay.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. County Administrator's Report, Public Safety Building Project Update.
Yes, sir. I'm going to ask Mr. Hildebrand to come forward, talk about the status of the project and give you an update. Gentlemen, Mr. Hildebrand did send a memo under intercepted cover on Friday that, to you about this project. I just realized we didn't print copies for you to have out here. So if you go, I'm going to print them right now on the 911.
Okay,
Have that.
so just a quick update on the project that I sent out, a little update on Friday. Good progress last week. Mother Nature cooperated and a lot of dirt was moved. The contractor hauled 104 loads off the site to the landfill, on Wednesday or Thursday, and the following day, 154 loads went out. So, pretty fair amount of dirt, long way to go. But they got, majority of the material cut out of where the entrance to the site's gonna be, to get down to dirt that we possibly could use. I will say that our special inspector Draper Aiden came out and did some soil samples and ran proctors on some material that exists on site. Some of the material in good conditions can be used as fill in the lower sections of some of the larger fill areas. Some of that material's right in the front entrance, and we segregated that and put it on site. The likelihood of us using it anytime soon is not too good. Actually, no progress has been made this week. Nothing yesterday, nothing today, nothing more. Nothing we can do much about Mother Nature.
Could we put a large awning on the
Yeah,
site?
exactly.
How large a tent can you rent?
Our area of land disturbance that is approved by DEQ is just about 10 acres, so we need a 10-acre home.
Gibson's got one over there for the right price.
So as Brian mentioned, I did provide a memo along with that email Friday. We're gonna have some change orders. I mean, it's just inevitable, especially with the site. That's where our exposure is. And currently, as I mentioned in the memo, we don't have a budget. We don't have any contingency identified. But if we go back to the design phases, towards the end of the design, when we realized we had this dirt issue, we knew that was gonna be a problem. It was suggested that because material's gonna be taken from this site to the landfill needs dirt over time. There's not enough dirt at the landfill right now to cover our future, operations. So, we propose to, transfer some funds from the landfill fund to this project. And in essence, now's the time we're gonna do that. We identified, a budget amount of $352,000 we transferred. What I'm recommending, if the board chooses, is to transfer that money. We'll put it into a contingency line, for the project, and that money will be used to cover change orders in the site processes as they come up. And secondly, I'm asking the board's authorization to allow me to execute those change orders up to that dollar amount. That's $352,000.
How much are we saving in the landfill fund by this movement of this dirt?
How much are we saving? I don't know.
I mean, if we had to procure this dirt elsewhere.
It's kind of hard to answer that question, but in the future, if projects come up and dirt's available, it would depend on,
Haul distance,
haul
That-
distance and what those
that's the-
costs would be.
But you had budgeted to purchase dirt, had you not, at the landfill? I mean, I shouldn't say budgeted. We were aware of the fact that we were going to have to acquire dirt.
Yes, sir.
yeah. Worst case scenario, it's probably a wash, because there's not gonna be a lot of dirt that has to be hauled such a short distance.
Yeah, I know, I mean, I'm just.
Yeah, worst case
I'm just
scenario.
looking at, you know, if we're saying I'm taking it out of the landfill fund, that I would have had to spend that anyway to buy dirt.
Yeah,
And that's why I was just trying to see if we had any comprehension of what that cost would have
And
been.
there are some hopes that in the future, there'll be some projects close by. Matter of fact, there's some discussions right now, that we may, over time, get some free dirt, but can't really count on that.
Not in the quantities that you're talking about. Probably.
Cause it doesn't go real far over there. The landfill.
Okay. All right, any more questions occurred, or any motions?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, unanimous. Thank you. Budget update?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ms. Bradley and I have, working through the county's operations budget for the FY 19, FY 20 fiscal cycle. As I've informed board in individual conversations last week, I'm going to remove or delay my presentation of my proposed budget, which was scheduled 2 weeks from tonight on the 26th at 7 p.m. The reason for this delay is that, as you all know, Ms. Bradley was out for a bit and is back, but we are going to work in earnest on the budget here, and the additional time that we're going to have will allow us to bring something forward that will be complete. The other is understanding where the General Assembly is. The money committees have just released their funds certainly for the schools as well as the constitutional officers. We've gotten final numbers from the jail, which are good numbers this year, and so we want to factor all that in. The date that we will select has yet to be decided. She and I haven't had a real chance to sort through all of this, but one, I just want to say that we will not be doing it on the 26th, and that as soon as I have a date that we can tell you, we'll do that. As you recall, we have alternate Tuesdays, meaning the intervening Tuesdays between your regular meetings, plus we've also factored in some Thursday evening work sessions. And so what we'll do is when we select the budget presentation, we will then cascade from that the dates that you all would work on the proposed budget, and then set the tax rates to be advertised on a date certain, and then hold that public hearing on those rates in the proposed budget. So we have some luxury of a little bit of time, not a lot, but a little bit of time, but the additional time will be helpful to me and Ms. Bradley.
Okay, any questions on the budget?
Glenda, did I just check, get it all? Okay, thank you.
All right. Strategic priorities update?
Yes, sir. As you know, Mr. Chairman, you adopt two-year strategic priorities, and if I might take a point of privilege here, I've communicated this process of strategic priorities to some of my colleagues around the state, and to a one, they've all been very impressed with the way you go about your work. A lot of times, boards, elected governing bodies such as yourselves will adopt 20-year visions and 15 and 10 years, and that is good and well, but it takes a long time to get there. And what naturally happens is that there's turnover oftentimes on the elected bodies, and so what one vision was for one wouldn't turn out to be for the others. The fact that you all are doing it in two-year increments is actually where you can measure things and get things done, so you all certainly get applauded for that. I've updated the strategic priorities. As you know, it's the same format that I've been doing. We're on track. Some of them really are awaiting initiation, but we've got a few other things that we need completion before, as everybody knows that I work with, before we launch any more planes, we need to land a few. So that's where we are. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Board comment. Anyone have board comment tonight?
Actually, I do. This morning, the Economic Development Department did a employer roundtable session out at Homestead Building Systems. It was well attended by major employers in the county, and to no surprise to anybody, workforce was the single biggest concern, just finding people to come to work, period. And all the companies are having the same issue, and to Phil and Rose's credit, they brought all these people together to have these round tables, and had providers as well, the school system, Germana, Chamber, Marty from the Workforce Center, and coming up with a lot more positive ideas to move forward for these businesses. The second largest thing, and hopefully it can be worked on, is transportation for employees. For whatever reasons, a lot of entry-level employees do not have these little things called driver's licenses because they've been revoked in many cases. They can still be good employees, they just can't make it to work. So one of the discussions that was held, and there'll be more looking into it, is actually forming a transportation network, hopefully by the businesses, where they may have a van pool that could start at the eastern end of the county and deliver employees to work and then pick them up. But it was a very good session.
Was Marty there?
Marty was there. He had a lot of input. It was a very good group of business and government, and it was really nice to see the collaboration. A lot of things that a few years ago, we couldn't have imagined people agreeing on. And Dr. Sneed brought quite a bit to that meeting this morning, and actually offered for all of the school board to get out and drive the vans. That's all I have.
Starting with a pilot project. And
That's right.
all right. Any other board comment? Any questions on the information items? Any appointments? Okay, moving right along. We have a new calendar. What did I do with it? I buried it. Any calendar items? All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, there's one for thought, and I believe you may have received the email as well. Virginia Association of Counties, the Regions seven
Yeah.
summer meeting, they've reached out to us and would like us to schedule sometime in June if possible at a venue that we think would be good. So just for down the road a little ways to go on the calendar.
Yeah, we should take that as an action item to start thinking about places that we might want to host that meeting. They mentioned cultural, historical.
Yeah,
sort of-
that came in
Yesterday.
yesterday.
Yeah, just,
I'm
I
sorry.
think it was yesterday.
Oh, no, that's fine. I
It was,
just,
it was
I wanted to
my,
make
it was
sure.
my kind of list, so
Yep.
we'll figure out a great venue.
But, and that truly will benefit the county as well, being able to bring in the other counties from Region Seven and highlight the venue.
Okay.
I'm kind of thinking Montpelier.
Right. Closed?
Ready? Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Orange County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following matters: discussion, consideration of performance of specific employees of the public body, discussion, consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose, and discussion, consideration, and disposition of publicly held real property. Where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position, negotiating strategy of public body, specifically with respect to lease space for the Veterans Memorial, Bluebell Building, polling places, and .195 acres of land. Consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring vision of legal advice by such counsel concerning LODA, mold issues, data security, tax exemptions, and broadband contracts. And whereas pursuant to section 2.23711A1, A3, and A8 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting, now therefore be resolved. The Board of Supervisors of Orange County does hereby authorize discussion of four-state matters in closed meeting. Need that as a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You snuck in. I didn't even.
Members of the board, to the best of your knowledge, were the only matters discussed in the closed meeting, public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and that only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Crozier?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin is absent, and Mr. Frame.
Aye. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, coming out of closed, I need a motion authorizing us to schedule a public hearing to dispose of .195 acres of land.
So moved.
Second?
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay. All right. Just past the 7 o'clock hour. I'll open the public comment period. Anyone signed up?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Close public comment. Okay.
I think anybody in the audience who wants to speak at this time, we certainly would entertain that.
And I'll waive the 3-minute
That's right.
rule for the moment. I thought there might be a short person. Actually, Sherry was sitting behind, I didn't know she was behind the screen. Oh, well. Let's see, let me look at the agenda again. Can we add something to?
Well,
No,
actually,
we're done.
We're done.
Mr. White, could I make another board comment?
Yes.
Sure, sure.
I think we can grant that.
Thank you. This afternoon, I got a interesting request from a resident in the county, inquiring as to when the Route 20 bypass was done in the Unionville area of the county.
Huh.
And we were taking some guesstimates, I called one or two people that I knew had lived in the county for a long time. And then, I actually contacted our board historian. And not only was he able to determine when it was done, but brought up the records that chronicled the change in the roads, what roads were vacated, what route numbers were changed, and everything else.
My
So,
goodness.
once again, I would just like to say thank you to the board historian. He is doing a superb job.
So can you answer the question?
Oh,
for us?
definitively, yes, as soon as I get back to the link. Let's see, in December of 1921, it was rerouted in another area. Let me get back.
Unionville was 1963.
I'm gonna say, the sixties,
Yes.
they did a lot of renovation on 20, all the way to 3.
Rhodesville was 67.
Yeah,
Yes,
the widening and straightening through the battlefield. Remember I dug up all those permits and things?
Oh, yeah.
Those were all 1960s. So they did a lot of work on 20 during the 60s.
yeah, but it
There's
was,
plenty enough room for 4 lanes,
Yeah,
Yes.
there is, there actually is.
yes.
even though the Park Service doesn't seem to understand that.
They need to read their own documents. I still have that. In fact, I ran across them not too long
You
ago.
keep them, keeping them set aside,
I
waiting for the fight that
Just
comes.
waiting for the moment.
Yes.
They'll deny forever that there's 110 feet. Well, there actually is a little, I think I told you this, there's a little strip right there by the exhibit in Sanders Fields, I guess
Yeah.
they call it. There's a little piece in there, less than half a mile, third of a mile, where it's actually not a true right-of-way to VDOT. It's an SUP, but it's 110 feet,
Okay.
just like the right-of-way is. It's a perpetual SUP. I didn't know that the Department of Interior issued SUPs. They did back in the 60s. Should we proceed with the public hearing?
Yeah, let's,
I hate to,
she's not here.
okay.
Let's go ahead and I can explain some of this stuff.
All right, you want to introduce us to the topic?
Sure. The Lake of the Woods Adaptive Water Sports provides a bunch of programs to help disabled and veterans do water skiing, paddle boarding, a whole range of things that they do. They have a truck and a trailer that they use to haul this stuff, and they are asking for an exemption on the personal property taxes for that. And we're talking about
$330.
$330, but it could change if you know, and, yeah.
Are they asking for an exemption going forward?
Well, they are asking for it going forward. I would limit it to the, all future personal property tax based on our tax exempt and priority public charity status. I don't know, if they decide to buy a big building or do a lot of other things, I think that,
You want to cap the
I would
assessed
probably,
value?
I would probably cap the taxes at like $500, or maybe even $1,000,
So a not to exceed number.
not to exceed $1,000. So if they get enough stuff that they are going over $1,000, they would need to come back to us.
Okay.
Because they acquire tremendous amount of personal property that I'm presuming they never title to themselves, but they have
Yeah.
a
In which
tremendous
case,
amount
if
of it.
somebody else keeps the title of it, pays the taxes on it.
Right,
Yeah, I mean, a couple of boats and you're in the,
yeah,
No,
and they have right now probably in excess of a dozen boats.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right,
Mr. Chairman, I would point out that the way the ordinance is currently drafted is for personal property tax exemption only.
right.
So if they did, acquire
A building?
any real property,
They would need to come back.
it would have to come back. There isn't a cap, and I would defer to the county attorney on putting that wording here in the ordinance if that's, what the board desired to do, but there's not currently a limit on the amount of personal property tax
Well, maybe if we
do
limit it
have-
just to personal property at this point, it'll take care of itself.
I would limit it to personal property, a maximum of $1,000 a year.
Okay, all right.
And you can make that change in your motion following the
Okay.
public hearing. I
Okay.
will also, point out that a condition of this tax exemption pursuant, I believe, to state code is that, any continuance of this exemption, does require an application to the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office, I believe every 3 years. They have to provide that they, are still a qualifying 501c3 organization, and that is managed through the Commissioner of Revenue's Office. Lastly, the way that I have the ordinance drafted, the tax exemption takes effect, for the 2019 tax year. That is our standard practice. However, I know that when we were scheduling it, Supervisor Frame mentioned possibly covering their 2018 taxes as well.
I
So
would
just
like to
wanted
cover the
point that out.
2018.
Okay.
2018, and of course, yeah, the 3 years, that's good. And a maximum of, and only the personal property tax, and a maximum of $1,000 a year. So if they buy a new boat or something like that, they're covered. If they decide to accumulate a building or a lot of boats, then they would have to come back to the county for,
Okay. All right, let's open the public hearing. Open the public hearing on the request for personal property exemption. Do we have anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. The applicant is here, if you would.
Okay,
Hi, my name is Lana Marr.
come up to the podium and,
I'm here to represent the Lake of the Woods Adaptive Water Sports. I know Mr. Crozier and I've met Mr. Frame, who, I know Mr. Frame's a resident of the lake and Mr. Crozier's well aware of our activities and what we do. And this is, in no way is for any kind of personal gain. This is simply to give us a little more money to put on the events that we try to put on, which are adaptive water sports and activity days for wounded veterans and differently abled adults, teens, and children. So every dollar helps because we are 100% volunteers and 100% donation run. So thus the request for relief from the personal property taxes.
okay. All right, thank you. No one signed up, so we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion or questions, anybody?
okay, where do we need to change the wording?
If you want to just include it in the motion, Tom, the
Right,
county
the-
attorney and I will work on the,
Yeah.
it will probably fall as an additional condition. One, 1 through 6 is listed here, and we can add, an additional exemption for the cap of $1,000.
And another, and make the effective,
Yes, sir,
January
that is
1,
to
18.
2018, yes.
okay. All right.
So it would be a motion to adopt with the amendment of it going back to January 2018 and with the amendment that it be capped at $1,000. in
I
tax.
make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Let's do a roll call.
Yes, sir, Mr. Frame,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
Mr. Goodwin is absent, and Mr. White,
Aye.
4-0.
All right,
Aye.
I need one other motion.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.